Hey, what's up, everybody? It is your girl, Constance Carter, and welcome to Fly Nubian Money. Today, you guys, come on in. We have a lot to discuss. Black people, we have a lot to discuss. We are talking today about a really serious flaw in our educational system, and this is a muy importantes. Okay, not importantes, importante. It is muy importante. Recently, it was reported that 23 schools in Baltimore have no students, zero students at their grade level when it comes to math. They are not proficient in math. Now, this is a huge red flag, and it makes you wonder. It makes you really wonder what is really going on in our schools, especially for Black schools, being that Baltimore is 62% Black. We're going to break down what's happening and what it means for our babies, what their future is going to be like, and how we can really push for real change. And I am joined by the most amazing and brilliant co-queens on the planet. Y'all give it up. We have Dr. Charm, psychic medium. We have Dr. Felice, the Be Big mental health coach. And hold on, y'all. Wait a minute.
And stand-up comedian, she left that off.
I'm sorry, I wasn't even looking at the screen. I'm sorry. Okay, so we have Dr. Charm, the stand-up comedian and psychic medium. We have Vanessa Gopal, master. She has a master's in public policy, entrepreneurs, and international travel. And then we have Dr. Felice, who is the Be Big coach. She is a mental health and counselor. Y'all wasn't looking at the screen, so and then I couldn't find my place. So excuse me. But hearing that. What do you think, Dr. Felice? What do you think about this whole idea of 0% of the students? Is it because they say to and bu? Is that the reason? If y'all know about Baltimore, y'all know what I'm talking about. What's going on?
Oh man.
First of all, I think that's horrific, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that it's come to light and come to our attention. And I'm always asking for grace, but I think it's strategic. I think it's okay for the country to be all right with us to have a group of individuals who are not math proficient. And I think it has a lot to say about our country and where we're going and the things that we need to change, because this is our future. And if you're okay with our future not being equipped, then there's something wrong. There's a deep divide, and we got to do something about that. And it's unacceptable on so many levels.
Yeah. Vanessa, why do you think they've allowed this to happen for so many years? In your opinion?
I think, and I have what people have called a radical approach. I don't believe in the public school system as it is. I think that it needs to be completely restructured. It's not working. Baltimore is the district the city that we're talking about today. But you can look in Illinois, you can look at Minnesota, you can look at Mississippi, you can look in Louisiana, and keep going down the list. This is a constant in the public school system. So I believe that the whole public school system needs to be restructured and the class sizes need to be reduced. There's a lot of money that we put into public schools. It is one of the most inefficient. If it was a business, it would fail. This could not be a private, successful business with this amount of money going in and the success rates coming out. So, I just think overall the public school systems need to be restructured. That's why I think the student, absolutely. I think we put too much money in it. I think the money is spent. It's inefficient. You could not in a business get that much money and fail. You would have to close your business. So I think if we looked at it from a business perspective and, and the teachers are, if you look across America, teachers are quitting left and right.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not getting paid.
They're not getting paid. And they're dealing with 34 kids in a classroom. It's ridiculous.
34 badass kids at that. They just trying to get by. They just trying to stay alive, And Dr. Charm, when you look at, because I love what you said, Vanessa, but when you look at your thought process behind it, that's really a Republican when we look at politically. Republicans are saying we need school reform. Democrats are really saying we're good the way we are. We need to put more money in the education system. So what do you think, Dr. Charm, when it comes to the politics of it all and why our schools are not moving forward and how the different approaches of these different political parties fare when we're talking about our school systems?
Well, I think if there's, as far as the politics of it all, there's incentive to it. I mean, there was a myth that they look at third grade reading scores to determine how many prisons to build. So that's been debunked. Yeah, that's a myth, but that's been debunked. But 70% of people in prison read below a fourth grade level. So there is a tie between literacy and incarceration. And, and you think about it, if you don't have the skill set to be functional in society, which, having basic reading is a skill set. If you don't have that, then you don't have the skills to get a job and to be productive. And I always look at the story of Freeway Ricky Ross. I don't know, this is who the rapper stole his persona from, but he was one of the biggest drug dealers in U.S. history. He was at one point making $1 million a day with when they flooded L.A. with crack. But his story is so profound to me. I always thought it was fascinating, even when I met him and talked to him, because he was pretty much functionally illiterate, and they had passed him in California schools, passed him, but he could play tennis really well. So he had gotten a tennis scholarship to junior college to go to community college and play tennis. But when he was getting ready to graduate, the coach found out he couldn't read. So they pulled his scholarship back. So because they pulled his scholarship, he didn't go to college for tennis. He started stealing cars. And because when he started stealing, because he hadn't been in any legal trouble or, been in any trouble. He was straight, square kid, started stealing cars. And then that turned into him selling drugs and, being one of the biggest drug dealers, X, Y, and Z. And then get this, he gets sentenced to a life sentence in prison. And he had $1 million lawyers because he didn't lose his money. The reason he was able to get out of prison is because he learned how to read in prison and looked up the case law and found a loophole in the law and figured out that when they sentenced him, they had misapplied the law. And that's how he got out of prison. Because
turns out he wasn't as dumb as they thought he was. They just were not educating him, which is what they do to a lot of our children. So as you guys come in, hey, I see some new people are on here. You are watching Fly Nubian Money. We are here every day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So every time we come live, if you want to receive notifications, make sure you text the words Queens to 87948. That's QUEENS to 87948. And you can also listen to us on Spotify, y'all. We on Spotify. So every time, if you can't look at us, if you can't watch our beautiful faces, guess what? You can listen to us on Spotify. So if you go down to Spotify, go on down to the Spotify, search for Fly Nubian Money, and you can hear our discussions every single day. Now let's get back to it.
Just real quick, because I just wanted to finish that last thought. And with Freeway Ricky Ross, my final thought was, to me, the lesson that he had to learn was reading. He got into prison because he couldn't read, and he got out of prison because he learned how to read.
That's crazy. And again, it goes back to them passing our children and not really caring. Let me ask you this, Dr. Felice. Do you think racism plays a part in how they educate our children?
I absolutely do. And, I know we get tired of hearing the race card, but this is America and this is real for us. And not only that, if you think about it too, like, I think integration was one of the worst things that could have happened for Black children when it comes to education, but they made it political and they made it money, right? So if you live in certain districts where there's more Black people, it's based upon your tax dollars, right? And those tax dollars equate to the level of education you get. But if you think about it, like HBCUs, our children do better, I believe, in HBCUs where they have people who look like them, care about them, and want to educate them. How do you expect your child to go into a white school? I mean, especially back in the day, and expect those teachers to pour into them and to educate them on the level that they were doing for their children? Not saying that it make it right or anything like that, but I just think that segregation wasn't necessarily a bad thing when it comes to educating our children and making sure that they get what they deserve. We just got to make sure that now we put money in those communities so that they get equal opportunity. But I'm also not an advocate for public education, and I'm just going to keep it real. Not one day did my daughter do public education, and I robbed every disciple every month to make sure she stayed out of public school. For this very reason, I didn't
She
trust
said,
that they
wait, because I was wondering where you was going. She said, I robbed every disciple. Okay, let's go.
because I wanted to make sure that she got the education that I knew she deserved. And if that meant that I had to sacrifice a disciple in order to get it, then I did that. And my daughter is brilliant, to God be the glory. And I counted to her not I'm public school and I'm brilliant, right? But
Yeah.
it's a different day now, and they're not doing the same thing. And I agree with our sister here who was saying that, we need to revamp the public school system. Totally need to revamp it. And we need to think outside of the box about different ways that we're going to get our children educated, especially if they're going to be our future and our future leaders.
But let's look at this conversation politically, since now we're up for election season, and how the Democrats look at the education system and how the Republicans look at the education system. From what I can see and from my vantage point, Democrats are like, we good. And Republicans are like, that we want to take money out of the Department of Education and we want to put it somewhere else. It doesn't mean that they don't want to educate our children. It means that the education system is failing. So to your point, Vanessa, what do you think in terms of politics and how the different political parties weigh in on the education system?
I mean, I think that honestly, each party has a bit of an extreme approach. Democrats, to me, they just throw money at the problem. But if you're throwing money at a person that doesn't know how to manage money, then it's just stupid. In terms of taking money out of public schools, I don't believe that I don't think that that's the approach. But when you do look at the money, the average student pupil receives about 15,500 per student. Now in New York, they spend about 30,000 on each student. Just to give you an idea, if you have 30 kids in your class, that's $1 million classroom. So when you think about, every kid in New York should be the brightest bulb on the planet, right? $1 million per classroom. That is what we are spending. Our teachers are getting about 70,000 on average of that, especially in some of the higher performing or higher cost states like New York, California. However, we're not seeing that. So, I mean, the money is there, right? The money in the public education system is there. Like I believe in a pod system. I believe that we should restructure the schools. Each teacher should have about 10 students. And that would, it's easier to deal with 10 students, social issues, at home issues. It's easier to communicate with parents when you have 10 students. The teacher gets paid more. You only need to educate, honestly, about 4 hours a day once you have that class size. It's very one on one. And let the after school programs that we give the federal dollars and state dollars to, the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, pick up, where they can do their PE, social activities, and so forth. So that's what I believe. I believe both parties kind of have it wrong, and it's just crazy that we live in such a huge country with such diversity, and we have two party systems, and we're supposed to just be like, oh yeah, this side has it right, or this. No, it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So I believe that going further, I think charter schools try to do that. My daughter goes to a charter school, and I really like the charter school. It's a public school. It's ranked really high, but we pick up as parents, we pick up a lot. I mean, she's doing book reports on Black history. Every week we go through her math. I'm teaching her like third grade math, and she's in first grade. I understand every parent can't do that, but like I said, if we get our class sizes down to a 10-to-1 ratio, I think we'll see a major increase in our students' performance. Also, the Democrats, they changed this Common Core math. We're talking about math here. So the same math that we're learning, you add 56 plus 66, you stacking on top of each other, boop boop, you get the number. They're learning something completely different. So when these kids are bringing home this work, it doesn't look like anything that we've seen.
It's
So I think
nonsensical. It's just stupid.
it is stupid. It's stupid.
It's
So
strategic.
yeah.
Well, so let me ask the audience, what do you think about our public? Let me ask you, did you go to private school or did you go to public school? Were you able to afford to go to private school, or were you able to afford to go to public school? I think the bottom line, and if you guys could answer that in the chat, I'm a product of public school. My children went to both. My children actually went to three. They went to private school. They went to IB. They went to a charter school, and they also went to public school. But I think at the end of the day, the responsibility really lies on the parents, making sure that the parents are engaged. But there's a book by Joanza Kunjufu, the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, which talks about how schools systematically will do things against Black boys, so that the tolerance levels are much lower. 70% of Black kids get expelled. Black kids get expelled 70% more than white kids. You have them trying to diagnose our children, especially our boys, with ADHD. And I had all these conversations with at the schools when my kids were in school. Now, when my daughter went, they treat Black boys totally different than they treat everybody else. I got 3 of them, and I had to read them their rights when my oldest son entered elementary school, and I had to let them know whose children they were talking to and who they were dealing with. And so by the time my other 2 came along, they were good. It wasn't that my son had behavioral issues, but the tolerance level is much lower than with anyone else's. And I knew that. And, just the things that he had to go through, I've had to read them their rights on several times. But I noticed that. The other thing I noticed is that racism really exists in the school systems. Do you think if these were white schools, this will be happening? Baltimore being 62% Black, these schools being probably 90% Black. This stuff would not pass if it were white children that were suffering and struggling like this. When you think about the tax base and how the schools are funded because of the property taxes, that's also not fair. So you have some schools that have an abundance, way more. They have Olympic-sized swimming pools that start state-of-the-art facilities that just make no sense. Then you go to these Black schools where you have kids that have hand-me-down books. They're in molded classrooms. The ceilings are leaking. The facilities are deplorable, and they have to go to school in these conditions. Sometimes hungry, some coming from impoverished backgrounds, where sometimes the parents don't even realize or really understand the need of their engagement in these schools. So there's a huge disparity in how America treats Black children as opposed to how America treats white children. White schools get $32 billion more in funding than Black schools. Doesn't mean they're smarter. They just have access to more resources. So for you, Dr. Charm, what do you think about how that all stacks up when it comes to racism and how society and how they treat our children versus other people's children?
Yeah, I mean, back to when you were talking about the political parties, I mean, the Republicans are definitely about school choice. And I was reading this story about this mom whose child, they were, whatever district they were in, participating in school choice, where they could take the money with them wherever they went, that they were allotted for. And her child had special needs. And she said that they were barely reading, barely verbal. And because they were able to take that money to a different district, she took it to a private school or something that's specialized. They had one-on-one therapists for this. And then her child began to be verbal and read at grade level. And she said you couldn't even tell anything was wrong with, that they didn't have any developmental challenges after a while because he had gotten such intense therapy. So to know, to be able to have this money and have these resources allotted that you could take it with you or to have more money per child, that's the critical. That's the difference between somebody being verbal and nonverbal. I mean, just on another note, I mean, I was in drama club or in thespians in high school, and I would win an award literally every weekend. We would do forensics tournaments, and we would do plays at some of these big schools. I'm from Houston, that had, that were out of the Houston Independent School District. They had these huge budgets, and we were looking at the stages and the props and things that they had. And, they had way more resources. Now we had talent. We were more talented, but they had more resources. And so those resources go a long way when you have resources. Mm-hmm. They really do.
Yep, they do. You're absolutely right. Let's take a look at this video that we have before we get to you, Vanessa, because I know I see you wanted to.
We obviously are not doing enough.
This is when people get fired.
Project Baltimore made the discovery after a source gave us the unredacted test scores for every school in Baltimore City. The data has not yet been released to the public, but we didn't just find 13 city high schools with 0 students who tested proficient in math. We also looked at the city's top schools, and what we discovered there may be just as alarming. According to the state test results, these are Baltimore's 5 top performing high schools in terms of math proficiency. At these schools, a combined 809 students took the state math test in the spring. 92 students tested proficient, meaning a total of about 11% of students are proficient in math at the best high schools in Baltimore. When Maryland...
So what do you think about that? Vanessa, are standardized tests the problem?
I think they are a part of the problem, but I believe that, and I'm gonna just take my experience, just because I was a part of a program. I graduated in 2002 from a predominantly Black school in Minneapolis. I mean, we had maybe 5 white people in the entire school. We had a dropout rate. It was astronomical. Because so many kids, that we had a teen mom problem. So many kids were dropping out. The dropout rate was like 30%. It was crazy. Kids were failing. So Senator Paul Wellstone got us funding for my class specifically as a test pilot program. They gave us laptops. He brought Urban League programs in that allowed us to go to college visits. We visited Howard, Spelman. We got to go to the East Coast, the West Coast. And then the NAACP funded another program that was like Learn and Earn, where they paid us to go to these after school programs, but they would pay us. So, I mean, everybody went, right? Because we're getting paid to do our homework. We had a graduation rate of 92%. It was unheard of.
Wow.
All of the people, not all, but a large majority of the people that came out of my class went to Howard, Spelman. They all went to school and they all finished school. One of the biggest that North had ever seen. So I don't necessarily think, like, when we talk about like resources and all that, we had other programs that come in. We still receive less money than some of the suburban schools, but I think it's just about resources. We as Black people are brilliant. We can perform. We are resilient. We are. I mean, I just feel like even with the standardized tests, we killed the standardized tests. You know what I'm saying? So I think there is a problem in it. But do I think we're incapable of reaching any of those standards? No, I just think that even with the money that we have, I just think that it's being mismanaged. And our students they don't have one-on-one attention. The teacher doesn't have the bandwidth to give our students what they need. So I mean, yeah, we could pick out problems. Oh, this is too hard. This is not that. But I mean, real talk, like when it's time for us to get it, when we have the resources and when we're taught right, we kill everything. So I just feel like the money is there. The money is there. Like, even looking at this Baltimore situation, they're getting I think I read 15,000 and some change per student. They have an average of like 27 kids in the classroom. Think about that from a business perspective. So somebody pays you, $500,000 to teach these kids whatever they need to learn in first, second grade, and it just doesn't get done. It's not the teacher's fault, but you have parents who are involved, and then you have kids who are coming out of foster care. You have kids who can't eat. There's so many issues. So if she had 10 students and 2 of them had issues, she could probably have the bandwidth to give those kids extra attention. So I don't know. I don't think we have a funding issue. I think that we have a structure issue with everything.
Dr. Felice, resources matter. So do you think that if like this school district had more resources, there would be a difference? I mean, I want to get on homeschooling in a little bit, but I really want to like just talk about like resources. Like, is it because we're not putting enough resources in these schools? Is it because we don't have the right teachers? Who's at fault, really?
I think it's so multifaceted, right? I think it's all of it. I think, yes, resource is key. It's ridiculous that you can go into a Black community and have no books and they have no computers, or they don't have the technology to bring them up to date. And then you go into another district and they do. Well, what do you think is going to happen, right? And then you think about, like, I hear about the structure. Well, first we got to recruit people who want to go into these classrooms, right? And if you're going to downsize the classroom size, you got to have the people who are going to go in. That means you got to have more teachers, because we're living in a society now where a lot of our kids have to go to public school because they can't afford private school. So it's that number, right? Demand and supply. And then you have, you got to make sure that these teachers are equipped to teach our children. One of the main reasons why we have low math proficiency is because our teachers don't even know how to teach the math that you want them to teach our children. And so you've got all these multifaceted things that contribute to the demise of our children, Americans. So we talk about Black people, then you Americans as a whole, our numbers suck when it comes to math proficiency. And math proficiency is key. I mean, literacy is key too, but math proficiency is key. That's your cognitive. That's your ability to problem solve. That's your ability to think outside of the box and handle life situations. We need math proficiency on so many different levels. And as Americans, we are sucking. China, Japan is outpacing us. And so I think our concern too is social media. We dumbing down our kids. All they doing is scrolling. How smart can you be if all you do is scroll? And so we got, it's multifaceted. It's bigger than just that. You know, it's a whole bunch of stuff. And where do we start? We start with these conversations and dialogue.
100%. And since you brought up where we stand in America, I want to look at a couple of slides. But, you know, if my kids came to me, and I'm going to ask you guys this, if your kids came to you and people in the comments and said, I want to be a teacher, would you encourage or discourage them? Personally, I would not encourage my kids to be teachers. I wouldn't. And it's sad. They're not getting paid. They're living in poverty. They have to use their own money in order to supply. A lot of times I coach Black women from all over the country. A few of them in my cohort are educators, and they tell me about how, you know, how much they get paid and how much they have to spend on supplies so their classes can be running efficiently. I would not encourage my children to become a teacher. And then the abuse that a lot of them have to take in these classrooms and the disrespect, I would not encourage my kids.
You blinded somebody. You heard about that teacher that they threw a hanger at her, a Black American teacher, and blinded her?
No, I didn't hear about that one.
That gives me the heebie-jeebies. That gives me the heebie-jeebies. But in the chat, how many of you ladies would actually encourage your children to be teachers? But let's look at these statistics. I want to look at these slides. PISA, the U.S. schools versus other countries. Now, this is very important. This assessment evaluates 15-year-olds in reading, math, and science every 3 years. In recent PISA results, U.S. students typically rank around the middle of the pack compared to other developed countries, with scores lower than Singapore, Japan, Finland, and China. In the TIMSS, this study focused on 4th and 8th graders in math and science. U.S. students often perform well into elementary grades, but show a decline by 8th grade compared to top-performing countries like Singapore and South Korea. Now, this is a travesty, and again, racism, which is enveloped in the fabric of this country, is also going to be the thing that kills our country. Because of racism, and we're not putting the funds in these schools, we're not able to compete on a global level. So we're cutting off our nose to spite our faces because we don't want to educate the Black babies or even the brown babies. I know y'all don't like to have Black and brown together, but it's true. When you have Black and Hispanic schools, they don't like to educate us on the same levels as everybody else. But when we go out into the world and we got to compete, guess what you're going to do? You're going to bring all these foreigners from other countries in to do the jobs. I'm from the Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley used to be very diverse. It's not as diverse anymore. It's mostly Asians, mostly Indians and Middle Easterns from other countries. Mostly. You go to Walmart, it's like a third world country up in there. You don't see no Blacks. You barely see any white people. You really see people from all over because they have to bring in people from other countries to do the jobs that we can't do because y'all ain't educating our kids.
That's right.
What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Charm?
I think education is definitely key. I mean, it really is the key to success in lifting people out of poverty. I mean, I come from a working class neighborhood. We didn't have extra money, single mom. We have extra money for all these other things. And fortunately, because the school system had piano classes and dance classes and drama and gifted and talented programs. I was able to become the first person to graduate college to attend and graduate college in my family, and then went on to medical school. So, and I wouldn't have had those opportunities had I not gone through a very good school system at the time. Houston Independent School District was amazing. And there are so many people from my neighborhood in Houston that, were lifted out of poverty and are doing very well because we were privy to a really great education. So it makes a huge difference. It's a life and death difference. As I mentioned, the statistics about the 70% incarcerated folks reading at 4th grade reading level. And then just to think about lifting how Black people lifted ourselves out of immediately after slavery, we were able to increase our literacy level, I believe, by 80% within that first decade. I mean, that's unheard of. I've never heard of many statistics like that in history, that we were able, because we had reading circles and groups, and that's when all these HBCUs started getting started, because there were so many Black people through the Black church, and just wanted to get together and improve our station in life.
That's good. You know, Dr. Fleece, I totally agree with you when you said integration is the problem. And it reminded me of what Dr. King said. I believe that we are sending our people to a burning building. You know, now that we have integrated, now we have to go to these other schools, and now they're not putting the money in our communities, and now there's no sense of care and pride that are in our schools. Dr. Fleece, what do you think about the option to homeschool kids? What do you think about that as being an option? Now, I've talked about that with Boyce a lot, and he's like, well, we need to homeschool our kids. Well, I'm a parent. I have no idea how to homeschool my kids, nor do I have the time to homeschool my kids. So how does that work?
So, well, first of all, I just want to say that my daughter is a teacher, and I'm so grateful that she has chosen that profession. And she, you know, she works in the Black and brown schools. So she's making sure that she gives all of her talent and energy to our future.
That's great.
And thank God for her village.
Mm-hmm.
She needed. But I believe in homeschooling. And I got some statistics to hear about homeschooling. On average, homeschool students tend to score higher on standardized tests than their public school peers. Homeschoolers are often just as successful, if not more, in college. And this is according to the Journal of College Admission. And contrary to concerns about socialization, research suggests that homeschool students often engage in more varied social experiences than their counterparts. And they have long-term studies that show that they are more likely to pursue entrepreneurial careers, vote, and be civically engaged. So we've got these options, but we also got to equip a lot of these parents too, because everybody's not going to be able to go in and give their children that 4 hours that you're suggesting, that if you have just a small pocket of children that you can teach. Well, do you even have the skills to really do it? And that's where community is going to come in. Mm-hmm. We got to start getting more community and village minded again about, so it may not be you to homeschool your children, but you can at least send them to the community homeschool where somebody is equipped and willing to make sure that they impart and teach and rise your children up to the levels that they need to be. So I believe in homeschooling. I think it's great. I think it's a wonderful option, and that we got to think outside of the box to make it happen for those parents who aren't equipped to be homeschoolers or homeschool teachers.
I'm telling y'all, advocacy is extremely important. I want to look at this other video, you guys. I think this sheds a real light on kind of what's happening in Baltimore when you have parents who are disengaged from what their children are doing every day when they go to school. That is also a critical piece, I think, of the educational piece.
All right, be strong, son. We got this.
He's stressed, and I am too. Like, I told him I probably will start crying. Like, my son is, I don't know what to do for him.
This coming June is when Tiffany France thought her son would receive his diploma.
And I'm just trying to fight. He like, Mom, what was all this for? What did I do this for? Like, don't he get a chance? Do he get a chance?
But after 4 years of high school, this mom just learned her 17-year-old has to start over. He's been moved back to 9th grade.
Why would he do 3 more years in school? He didn't fail. The school failed him. The school failed at their job. They failed. That's the problem here. They failed. He didn't deserve that.
France's son attends Augusta Fells Savage Institute of Visual Arts in West Baltimore. His transcripts show in 4 years, he has passed just 3 classes, earning 2.5 credits, which places him in 9th grade. But France says she didn't know that until February. She has 3 children and works 3 jobs. She thought her oldest son was doing well because even though he failed most of his classes, he was being promoted. His transcripts show he failed Spanish 1 and Algebra 1, but was promoted to Spanish 2 and Algebra 2. He also failed English 2, but was passed on to English 3.
I'm just assuming that if you are passing, that you have the proper things, to go to the next grade. And, the right grades, you have the right credits.
As we dig deeper into her son's records, we can see in his first 3 years at Augusta Fells, he failed 22 classes and was late or absent 272 times. But in those 3 years, only one teacher requested a parent conference, which France says never happened. No one from the school told this mother her son was failing and not going to class.
Yeah.
Francis.
Now, ladies,
this is ridiculous. And here's my thing. You don't, if you put 50s and 55s on your freaking Spanish, and she was like, oh, but they passed him anyways. Like, where's her self-awareness?
How
First
do you
of
not
all-
know for 3 years that your child is failing or missing 272 days of school, and you just blame the school? Come on now.
That's a parent Kamala would have locked up back in the day.
First of all, to say that the school has failed, she has failed as a mother. I know she works 3 jobs. I'm self-employed and I'm actually single parent now. I was first one in, last one out, but I always had time to check in on my children. You prioritize what is important to you. And obviously her children's education was not important. How do you not know? Talking about the school failed. You didn't know your kid had all these F's. You didn't know that they weren't attending school, that they weren't showing up, that they was cutting class. Let me tell you something. My kids last year was late hella times because they was getting out the house late. Guess what I got? A warning. If you don't get these kids to school on time, we will take your ass to court, right? Us as the parents, we are responsible for our kids showing up. When I moved out this way, it was funny because my son said, and I'm the biggest advocate for my children, but my son said, I got a notification saying they didn't have his credits from when we moved from California. So they were about to put him back in the 9th grade. He was in 12th. He was about to slit his wrist. And I was like, oh, whoa, hold up. But sometimes schools do make mistakes. But if we are engaged and advocates as parents, there's no way that this could happen. And so there's enough blame to go around. There's blame for the schools, absolutely. But as parents, if we just took a little bit of interest in our children, that certainly would not have happened. What do you think, Dr. Felice?
I agree. And too, I can't imagine what it's like to have 3 jobs, 3 kids. She's probably coming home, and that extra time that she could take to make her children a priority, she's probably sleeping. Right?
No, a text message to the school, text the teacher. Like,
I know, but everybody doesn't have the same level of capacity, right? And everybody doesn't have the same degree of what some people's priority is keeping the lights on and making sure that they eat. Not saying that what she did was right. I totally get it. But what I'm saying is that we live in a society where people are having to make choices. And sometimes the basic needs are what get addressed versus an education. And we've seen it a lot in areas of poverty, right? Where your necessities, right? And somebody says, why does she have 3 kids? Well, that's neither here nor there. We don't know, but they're here. And so, and again, I'm all about village. It takes a village to be a part of, because it's so easy for us to say, why didn't she? I don't know. But I do know that we are the front line to our children's success. And that if we want our children to be successful, then we got to be a little bit more mature about how many we really have. If you know that you don't have the capacity to take care of all these kids properly, then you might want to reconsider how many children you really have, right? Because that could be it too. Like, you just don't have the capacity. And so,
Marilyn, go sit in the corner, Marilyn. Go sit in the corner, Marilyn.
Anyway, so I'm just saying that I agree. I think that the parents are the front line to our children's success. And we must never just leave it up to solely the government or to systems or anybody else for our children's success. We come first when it comes to that. And we should be keeping an eye on and prioritizing what they're doing.
And I love, you know what? You definitely have way more compassion than me as a therapist. I love your approach to, her having a village and, she's just struggling and mentally maybe she's what we got to do, Black people. And I'm tired of coddling us. And I'm not a therapist like Dr. Felice. I think that we have to take control of our lives. And this is a prime example of us not being responsible human beings, of us not being.
Constance, let me interrupt you though. But if you think about like what Dr. Charm was saying back in the days, like our statistics with us being able to read more and it's so quickly, and we had the Black Wall Street, that was village. All right. And so how do you pull up from that was village? We got to get back. I hear what you're saying.
I understand that. And I'm with the village, but we got to take responsibility. The way that this lady said, the school has failed. No, she has failed as a mother. And Absolutely. As a mother, we have responsibilities for our children, not just to put food on the table, but provide an environment to where they're safe, that they're educated, that we're taking care of business, that we're taking care of them holistically. And she failed as a mother. I don't give a damn. I know she ain't got a village. We don't know if she got a village or not. However, I believe that she was part of that failure that she talks about. What do you think about that, Dr. Charm?
First of all, she didn't know he couldn't, that he was failing all these classes. I mean, could he read a menu? It's just. Why
are you like this?
I'm a comedian. Hello. And where is the father? I hate when all this happens and it's like all the blame. There's blame to be spread all around. Where is the father? Where's the uncles? Where is the father's side of the family? Why is it on this woman to be over here with these 3 children working 3 jobs? So obviously she's not getting the help that she needs, and she has to work 3 jobs to make ends meet. Let's spread this responsibility around. But I'm sorry, if you've seen the report card where it says 50, he got a 50 and a 55 in Spanish, but he still passed. I know that might be providence from the Lord, but I want to know how is he passing? If he, if he got 50 in Spanish, okay?
Yeah, Deborah, I like what Deborah said. She said mothers and fathers have to take their rightful place. Let me say that one more time. Put that on the screen, please. Deborah will win. The last comment said mothers and fathers have to take their, Gwen, put it on the screen. Mothers and fathers have to take their rightful place. And I'm glad that you pointed out that where's the fathers? Where's everybody else? Where's the rest of the village? Like Dr. Felice said, still, as a mother, I don't give a damn, right? I don't give a damn. I'm a single mother now. Daddy ain't nowhere around. He doing whatever. I'm responsible for my children, period. If he don't want to show up and do whatever got to be done, I'm responsible as the mother. So if they fail, guess what? I fail. So I'm sorry, I'm really passionate about that. And I'm really passionate about us just not stepping up as Black people. We have so many excuses of what the man has done and our conditions and our social conditions that we just really need to take responsibility sometime. Vanessa, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, to your point, I do believe that we do need to have community, but sometimes you have to actively go find your community. If the church, if you got to sign your kid up to make sure that they're in the community center, the YMCA program, whatever, you have to take the time to go do that and secure. And sometimes it just takes a phone call. If you know your kid has missed school 272 times, where is a phone call? Is my child in school today? All right, great. Then that means you might have to take a day off work and go figure that situation out. I see in the video they showed he had a PlayStation or Xbox or something. So, I mean, I just feel like you have to, you can't, just not be a parent. So, I mean, I'm with you on that, Constance. I also agree on community, but sometimes we have to find our community. We have to make sure that our community is involved. We have to let our community know that we need help. Where if the father is not around and you have 3 kids and you work 3 jobs, you absolutely probably need some help. But maybe you have to take the time to go find the community and let them know that you need help.
Here's what I do know is in places like Baltimore, where you have these types of impoverished communities, you do have a lot of nonprofits out there that are willing to help. You do have a lot of resources. And just like you said, sometimes you need to go reach out to that community to get some help. And sometimes we just don't want the help, or we don't ask for the help, or we just want to do everything on our own, or possibly we don't even know that there's help out there. But there are tons of resources out there. Really quick, y'all, for y'all that just came in, we're talking about the 23 Baltimore schools that reported zero math proficiency amongst the schools, which is crazy. 15% of Maryland schools score proficient in math statewide in the state of Maryland. I just moved to Maryland. What the hell? Nationally, only 20% of Black eighth graders are proficient in math, compared to 44% of white students. Per pupil, funding in Baltimore is one of the highest in the county, yet the outcomes remain the worst, which is, it doesn't really jive with the idea that the more resources that we have, the higher the schools, the test score should be. What do you think, Vanessa, is the problem? Because you mentioned about the resources, and well, how come that's not translating into this test? Oh, because you mentioned the pods, the idea of the class sizes were just
Yeah,
too
I
big.
mean, I honestly think, and the superintendent, by the way, when they report these things, we didn't talk about this. They have been not reporting the accurate data. So what they do is they put below 5%. So sometimes, even if you are just going to your taxpayer and you want to see the test scores in your county, they're not reporting the raw data. So you don't know, but the journalists have figured it out, and that's how we have these results. But I think it's just the restructure of it. I personally don't think that we do know that it's an unfair society with our Black children, right? We know that. We know that's America. If we haven't figured it out yet, that we unfortunately are going to have a harder time reaching certain milestones if they're there pushing us back, if we left it up to them. But obviously we can't leave it up to them. So I think I'm always a big proponent of voting, making sure who your superintendent is, which, by the way, the superintendent, he resigned in Baltimore
As he
because
should
of
have.
because of all this. So I think it's important that we have to really get involved and see how the money is being spent. I'm a huge advocate of just getting class sizes down. I think if teachers were getting paid $70,000-$80,000 a year, and they only had to deal with 10 students, I think it would make their job a lot easier. I think that they could, give one-on-one attention. And also, going back to some of the homeschooling stats, one of the biggest things why homeschoolers do so well is because they get one-on-one attention. Even in private schools, when you go to private schools, the big differential between the private school and the public school isn't necessarily the funding, it's the one-on-one attention that you're achieving from the teacher. I think that we have a lot of great Black teachers. I think that we can incentivize more people to be teachers if we created a better condition for classrooms. If you're going into a classroom and you're saying you have 10 kids to teach, and we're setting the minimum salary not at 40, but at $70,000-$80,000 a year when you enter, I guarantee you it's an incentive for us to have more teachers. Specifically, we can engage more Black teachers. We want to know how our children are being taught. Give them, I mean, some of my best teachers have been Black teachers because I can tell they care about me. It was
Yeah.
different, especially my 8th grade math teacher, Miss Bryan. I remember her. She changed the trajectory of how I felt about math in 1 grade. So I think that, like I said, the structure is the problem. I don't believe it's a money issue. Could we have more money? Yes, but with the money that we have, we can make a substantial difference by restructuring the classrooms and doing a 10-to-1 ratio. That's, I think that's achievable. I just think they like to waste money.
That's a good point. Big Mac said he was just collecting a check. Guess what? A $500,000 check a year he was collecting to redact those test scores and to report misinformation about how they were really performing. And you got to think about that. He was making $500,000 a year, and his school was still failing. Let's look at some more slides on what's been happening over here. So here's some comments that was on this this video. This was issued before the pandemic. Somebody said, and that's 11% at their top 5 schools. That's horrifying. At over $400K a year, I don't exactly understand what she brings to the table. If the Senate president doesn't hold any position accountable, can he justify why we need that position to even exist? Does he believe in any form of accountability? Why aren't they all embarrassed? The students, the parents, the administrators. This is a disgrace. Can't do math, perfect voters for the future. Isn't that the goal, to make socialist public education so bad that only the children of rich people who can afford to pay for private education? And that's the problem, right? Because only rich people or people with money can afford good educations. Parents are their children's first teacher. It's not just that part. It's not just the school's fault. And lastly, this is a damn shame on all levels. I wonder how proficient the CEO is in math, or anything for that matter, other than talking out both sides of her mouth and kissing the right asses. The shakedown needs to start from the top on down, leaving no one unblamed for these overpaid administrators and politicians to the parents, guardians of these young people. Everyone has accountability and responsibility when it comes to education, but for too long, it's always been a fight between teachers and parents. And so what do you think about that, Dr. Charm, in terms of the administrators also being at fault?
I mean, the fact that this child had 50s in Spanish and all that, they should have called this woman for a special meeting. Like I teach university, and if we have anybody who is struggling in the class, we do at-risk forms, and that's on a university level. I teach master's level courses, so that's on a master's level. So you would think on a secondary school level that they would call meetings and special meetings to alert the parents and keep an open line of communication just on the admin side. And then here's the other thing, it gets even more sinister, because I know Dr. Umar talks about this a lot, about, the schools get more money for special education, for special education students and students who are getting special services. And so that incentivizes them to keep people in special ed instead of working with them to get them out and get them, to their grade level and things. So I question, like, okay, well, now he's supposed to graduate. Now, they sending him back 3 levels. Like, why didn't they just leave him back once? Why is it when he's about to graduate, that's 3 more years of them getting funding for this child? And then it's inappropriate to have a 17-year-old. He's about to reach the age of majority, and he's going to be in school with minors. So then that puts, you get into, if they're dating and things like that, then you get into some legal stuff too. So, but, I think they have an incentive to put him back three grade levels.
Yeah, I know, just talking to my kids who are in high school, and one of the things that they say, a couple of things that they have an issue with. One, some of the teachers, they don't understand. Like, some of the teachers are like, Mom, I can't even understand this. They have these thick accents that I can't even understand what they're saying, really. And they don't care. Number 2, they're teaching with worksheets. So all they're doing is they're giving us worksheets. They're not teaching us anything. And so the state of education and how they're teaching our kids is deplorable. Dr. Felice, what do you think about that? The idea of, did you ever see that video of that white boy that was like, all you're doing is giving us worksheets. Can you teach these kids? Like, what are you doing? And the teacher kicked him out of the class. Remember that? What do you think about
that? I didn't see that, but I think it's horrific. And I think that, so think about it. A lot of it is probably teacher proficiency. You're asking these teachers to do and teach to something that they're probably not really proficient in themselves. Then you're asking them to care. So if somebody's making $40,000 and they're dealing with disciplinary issues, they're dealing with parents, a lot of parents who don't care, not calling and checking up. But you want this person who's a teacher, just because they're a teacher, they're still a human being. They're human. And you're wanting him to step in and do a job that either the parents not willing to do, like they don't care. And so I don't know, like it's so layered as far as the issues. Where do you even begin? And so no, I think it's horrible, but so is sending your child to school knowing that you're not going to follow up and hold the teacher accountable. So is you not checking the text to see whether or not they're even there. That's horrible. Right. So it's horrible on so many levels. And then we leave it on the teacher. Now we want the teacher to be able to diagnose kids and counsel them on their mental health. Well, they didn't go to school for that. So you keep piling on all this stuff and you want me to teach them? Yeah, I'm going to give them a worksheet. And deuces. Like, seriously, like, come on.
And you want to pay me poverty levels?
And you want to
pay me? I can't live.
I can't eat. On welfare? They on welfare. You know how many teachers are living in their cars?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you
I
want
know
them,
my aunt was
you want them to get them, you want
my,
them to teach.
my aunt was a teacher for probably 40 years, and she also was a waitress. In order for her to survive, she had to wait tables as well. Um, and so it's a travesty. But what do you think about the state of education, Vanessa, in terms of how they're educating? And I know you are advocating smaller class sizes, but what is something else that could be done outside of smaller class sizes, like the idea of just giving these kids worksheets for them to, or let me ask you this: biases, right? So a lot of these teachers have certain biases against our children, and we see that in law enforcement. We see that in the health profession of how they deal with us, and then we see that in education. How does that then affect how the kids are developed and how they're educated in the education system?
What apps? I mean, it sets them up for failure. I
Mhm.
mean, when you're teaching, you know, unfairly, or when you have a little attention span, if someone asks a question and you're ignoring them, and then you go and you call on the other, non-black student, and you're giving them more attention, then it sets us up for failure. But going back to it, is that we have to be responsible for our children. Constance, you mentioned that you had to show up a few times and read teachers their rights. I also think when you show up to school, I've had that experience. When you show up to school and you let a teacher know off top, this ain't that, not with this one,
Not
then
not not anybody with
not,
the last name Carter.
exactly, they move differently. So you have to advocate, and we have to advocate for our children. And if we can't, then we have to get a community member to advocate for our children. But it's like sending our kids into war without any armor.
Mm,
You're setting them up for failure. If there's nobody there to advocate for them, then what do you think is going to happen? Knowing that the system is designed for them to fail. So it's if you're a parent and you haven't showed up to teacher parent conferences, it's your fault that your child is failing. It's not the teacher's fault. Okay, because
yeah,
we can't keep expecting a system to be fair to our children when they've shown us, listen, we're not going to be fair
yeah,
unless you step up and you advocate. And even then, sometimes you still are at the school 3 or 4 times. The third day of kindergarten, my teacher sent me a message basically saying my daughter is the reason why the rest of the crowd gets loud, and that she's had a hard time adjusting. Mind you, she came out of preschool,
That's what happened to
brilliant,
me.
one of the best students ever. I said, let's have a sit down. Me and her father showed up, and I brought her whole book. Listen, my daughter is reading. She says she's bored. So what are you going to do to ensure that she's not bored? This ain't that. Don't play with me about my child, because we show up for her every day. I feel like you have to keep that energy with your children. If you show up with that energy, it's less likely that they're going to, when it's a problem, they're going to call you, because if not, they know that you're going to be up calling them. So we just have to advocate for our children. If we don't have the capacity, like this lady that was saying, 3 years. I mean, even if you work 3 jobs, maybe you got to go to church and say, hey, brother so and so, I need you to show up to the school. My son is having problems. You got to go to, a community center, something. But you have to be responsible for your children. You have
yeah,
to. It's
yeah.
just,
We got to we got to take back the responsibility. So let's talk about solutions, and thank you for your solution, Vanessa. And we're going to go ahead and just kind of wrap up. Where can they find you, Vanessa? Where
you
can
can
they
find
follow
me
you?
on Instagram at Vigo Paul. That's at VGOPAUL. Thank y'all for
There
tuning
we
in to
go.
listen. Thank you for the comments. Awesome, awesome discussion today.
Yeah, Dr. Charm, what do you think is the solution, lady?
The solution is that we need to have investments in extra services, tutors, and things like that. Because I was a math tutor. I had a math block in high school, and I deliberately chose to go to an engineering high school because I knew I was going to get more specialized education in math and calculus and all this, and ended up becoming a math tutor later on in college and medical school. So investing in those type of services and making sure that the schools that are in these lower income areas get as much dollars as the schools in the higher income areas, because it's really about the money. I mean, that's what started Brown versus Board of Education. It wasn't about integration. It was like, hey, we want to get the amount of money that the white schools are getting to, we want to, so we don't get the old textbooks and things of that sort. And so just wrapping up, where y'all can find me at CharmGirl77 on Instagram. I got a comedy show this weekend, and for all my Atlanta peeps, at Atlanta Comedy Theater, September 14th at 7 p.m. Come check me out. And if y'all want to get a reading, I got my text number in here, 404-832-5179. Look at get your tarot card reading or medium reading. And I'm so glad to be here.
Let's go. Thank you, Dr. Charm. All right, Dr. Felice, what do you think? What are your final thoughts and on the solution?
Okay, so I think that the education plays a big role even on our mental health, and a lot of the stuff that we're experiencing and sensing and seeing is mental health, from the anxiety, the frustration, the depression, the lack of economic mobility and stuff, from our educational system not being where it needs to be. And so I think that the solution is making sure that we get more teachers in the classroom, we give them more training and support. I think that we need to start incorporating a growth mindset and some mindfulness activities within our classrooms. I think we need more family engagement, where we are more responsible for our children and our students. I think we need more community programs in place that will help supplement some of these educational things. And I think we need to make education more equitable across the board. That's what I think are some of my solutions.
Amen.
And you can find me. I'm the Be Big Coach. So I'm Be Big Coach on Facebook, on Instagram, and www.thebebigcoach is my website.
.com or .net or .org. Okay, let's go. Thank you. So I'll just say this: show up for your kids. I don't care. Show up for your kids. Nobody is responsible for your children more than you are. And you cannot put that responsibility on nobody else. When my kids were in elementary, they all went to the same, they went to the same charter school from K through 12. So it would be four Carter kids. And guess what? We went to the whole family. We went to every single parent teacher conference together, all 6 of us. And they would say, wow, we never seen anything like that. I'm sure they haven't, especially with nobody that looked like us. And I made sure that we were at everything, and I volunteered. And even if you don't have the time to volunteer, just check in. A simple text. Sometimes I had to email, but they knew I was there. These is your kids. Their success lies on you. And for as long as they're in your house and they are under the age, you are responsible. You're responsible for your kids. Like, it's like when my mama would babysit the kids, sometimes she didn't feel like babysitting my badass kids. I couldn't blame her because they are my responsibility. At the end of the day, these kids are your responsibility. And I need you guys to take back control of your children, period. Schools ain't measuring up. Show up, speak up, send a text, send an email, do something so that they know you're there. Because I'm telling you, the amount of failures, the amount of suspensions, the amount of expulsions will decline significantly if you do one thing. Show up. Got to advocate for our kids. Thank you guys all for showing up today on Fly Nubian Money. You can find us every day, Monday through Friday, same time, same channel. And remember, if you want to get alerts before we go live, text the word Queens to 87948. That's QUEENS at 87948. Thank y'all. I love y'all. We have some of the best queens in the country right here today.